So we've been hearing all kinds of information and excitement about the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons. But does it actually make a difference to the average gamer's life? Welcome to Gaining Advantage. Welcome to Gaining Advantage. We are using tabletop games like Dungeons and Dragons to help you make lives better. I want to start out by just expressing my appreciation for your support. We began this quest to make a difference, and you are making that happen. We just love getting notes of appreciation, hearing stories, how you're using our work to make a difference where you are. We love hearing from role-playing game publishers who want to improve accessibility in their products, like those who saw our Braille conversion video that's right here on this channel, because Braille didn't really exist in the tabletop gaming space before this, and now it's becoming a reality, and that's awesome, and that makes us so happy. You have given me the opportunity to talk to various university groups about accessibility and inclusion because of recognition from our work. And that is so awesome. I especially want to thank our patrons, those who say, yeah, $2 a month, $5 a month, that won't make or break me. And you're giving that ongoing support. And the highest tiers allow us to make free community copies available. We have tiers set up so that we are giving away more than double in products than what we receive through our Patreon pledges. And so just such a huge thank you to all of you. And so we are making all kinds of cool stuff, like complete 4,000 plus word languages for gaming worlds with regional dialects, so that there's variations on the existing language, so that you can create original names for your places and your characters. I used it to create a gibbering mouther sound using the Knoll language that we developed, because this particular one in our home campaign was made of gnolls. And so I could say, you hear this coming from the Knowles tent. We have new adventures, NPCs, monsters, magic items, all the stuff that you can add to your game. Over 1,700 entries, all cross-linked with each other in our layer of content. So check out the link in the show notes for our Patreon and get all that great stuff and support our work at the same time. And now you can get books from our guests at our new bookshop, books.inclusiverpg.com. And that purchase supports our work, it supports our guests, and it supports local bookstores too. So it's a really cool combination, and it's kind of nice to be able to get those books from someplace that's not just completely destroying our world. Amazon. Speaking of books, let's get to the interview. You might have heard that Wizards of the Coast is releasing a 50th anniversary book on the history of D&D. But there's another book being released May 14th that will also celebrate the anniversary from a broader cultural perspective. 50 Years of Dungeons and Dragons from MIT Press. Joining us are Sidhu, a PhD student at the University of Sydney, and José Zagal, a professor at the University of Utah's Entertainment Arts and Engineering program. And together, they and their colleague, Marcus Carter, have edited a comprehensive exploration of D&D's legacy and impact on gaming and popular culture as it celebrates its 50th anniversary. Welcome, Pri and Jose.
Hey, everyone. Happy to be here.
Hi, thanks for the invite. Super excited to be here.
All right. So what would you like us to know about each of you personally, specifically speaking to the tabletop gaming crowd? Pri, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So for me personally, I've always been really interested in storytelling games and role-playing games, even from a young age. So some of the series I grew up with were like Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, World of Warcraft, but I didn't actually get into the tabletop scene until a little bit later in my life. I was introduced to it while I was a bookseller working at a bookshop. And I remember my friend coming up to me and being like, oh, like I'm about to start up this Dungeons and Dragons game. Do you want to join? And I was initially a little bit terrified because I was like, wow, I've never done this before. But I still play Dungeons and Dragons with that same group 8 years later, and I am so glad that I got introduced to this hobby.
Cool. Jose.
Wow. I'm the grognard, I guess, in the room, maybe. So I first started playing Dungeons and Dragons D&D in the mid '80s, and it's been a while since I've played D&D, but I've always kept a sort of a foot in the door. What's going on in the tabletop space? I guess I would say the last thing I played recently for a significant amount of time is decided to run a Cyberpunk 2020 campaign that we wrapped up in 2020, which was not the plan, but there we go. We thought there's some poetic justice to that. I've been a big fan of D&D and all kinds of tabletop role-playing games since I was a kid. Essentially, that's part of the reason why I'm here, in the sense of being a professor in games and doing research in games and so on. I have D&D to partly blame for that.
That's great. And I started in the early '80s, so I may have preceded you by a couple of years. So
yes, I'm not the oldest one in the room. Perfect.
All right. So tell us about 50 years of Dungeons and Dragons and what readers can expect from this book.
Yeah, sure. So 50 Years of Dungeons and Dragons is a collection of essays that reflects on the legacy of Dungeons and Dragons and also critically looks at some parts of the legacy as well. We've got a whole bunch of sections that look at Dungeons and Dragons histories, so things like mechanics and exploration. We've got a section that looks at the influence of D&D on other media and on culture in general, but also what culture and media has influenced Dungeons and Dragons to become. We've got a section that asks readers to critically reflect on their own play of Dungeons and Dragons. And we kind of wrap up the book with a speculative look at the future of Dungeons and Dragons, where readers can roll their own future.
So different chapters are written by different people, and we're really trying to straddle the line, and hopefully we've threaded the needle right in terms of balancing what is happening in the world of academia, so scholars who are looking into D&D and so on, and what's happening in the world of people that love the game and aren't scholars and just want to dig a little deeper. And so we're really trying to celebrate D&D, not in a rah like everything is wonderful, everything's amazing. There will be plenty of places that will be doing that. Rather, we want to celebrate it in a way that we feel is sort of celebrating the depth and what is actually happening with this game, or what it has happened over the years. It's sort of it's a celebration that comes from love, but also a place of caring and real interest. So we're all fans, but we're also fans and scholars. And so that's why I'm really excited in this book. We've been able to draw contributions from people that are kind of from different parts of life. And I think readers of the book will be hopefully pleasantly surprised in some of the chapters, and hopefully other chapters will be really thoughtful, and they will get them to think about the game in ways they hadn't thought before. So like I said, hopefully we've threaded that needle.
All right. So kind of part of that whole threading the needle thing, I mean, this is being published by MIT Press. These are very intelligent people writing these articles, and that sort of that raises my, okay, this is gonna take some work to sit down and read this and parse it, and that how easy to read is this? Is this something where it's like, if you're looking for a good intellectual challenge, or what? How is the approach of the book?
Yeah, I'd say as part of our editorial work, we have tried to make the chapters as accessible as possible. Some of them are written in a scholarly way, so they may challenge you, but hopefully you'd be able to pick up the book and pick up any chapter and get the broad gist of it.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about an edited collection, is that you don't have to read it from cover to cover. You can start at any chapter, whichever one draws your attention. And some of the chapters aren't academic at all. Like Pre said, we end with one that is speculative and fun, but there's also an interview chapter that's basically an interview with Ryan Dempsey. So I think there's enough there that you should be able to find at least one chapter that can draw you in, and then hopefully it's like, well, okay, let's try the next one, and get you in. This is not the academic book that it's all, here's all this theory and all these references to people you don't know with last names that you can't pronounce that have, no, we're definitely aiming for I think what we would call the a fan who is curious and wants to dig a little bit deeper. In addition to the scholars, like say, we are trying to hit both these audiences.
Sure. No, I mean, and that sounds really great too, because it's not just candy.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's like this stuff that you can chew on. It's like if you're watching TV, if you just all you ever watch is sitcoms, it can get just you feel the shallowness after a while, and you need a good solid drama, to or like a documentary or something to kind of sink your teeth into, and so it sounds like it's going to be a nice mix of that.
Yep.
Cool. That's great. So, were there any surprises or insights that especially resonated with you?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think each chapter kind of has its own little gem of insight, if you're interested. For me personally, being from an Australian context, I'm always really, really curious to see how D&D is played all across the world and at different tables. And so there is a chapter in the collection by Kellen, which looks at the localization and adaptation of D&D in the Southeast Asian context of Singapore. And so that was really, really interesting for me to read about.
As a publisher, who, I mean, we and I've got a lot of friends who are publishers, we have a really hard time cracking the Asian market. And so just, personally, like, oh, okay. All right, I have to read that. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jose.
Yeah, no, I think one of the things that's been interesting for me is that there's three of us in the book. So there's Pri, there's myself, and we have another editor, Marcus Carter. And I think if you'd ask each of us individually, which is your favorite chapter, or the chapter that surprised you the most, or which of the chapters you think is the most, will have the greatest impact, we would all disagree. We'd all pick different ones. And I think I see that as a positive in the sense it means I think we are trying to hit lots of different audiences and so on. Because I've been playing D&D, or have played D&D since the early years, I was really excited about, we have a chapter by Evan Torner that looks into the evolution of combat and combat systems in D&D over all the different editions. And even though I have all the books, I have all the core books for all the editions, it was sort of kind of enlightening and kind of eye-opening to see him like actually break it down and say, look, actually the combat system is really different. Now things have changed, and it's not just like the number crunchiness or you go this way or all that way. So it's like, no, they are fundamentally different combat systems in a way that I hadn't appreciated. So I was really excited about that one. I was also super excited to read the Ryan Dancy interview, because I remember the controversy around sort of the OGL, and then a lot of people sort of talk about how it was a great idea, but it was a terrible idea, and how it caused this economic collapse that is now forgotten perhaps by many. I thought it was interesting to hear from him and say, well, what was he thinking back in time, and what were the goals when he's now in a position where he doesn't have to be like the spokesperson for a company where everything needed to be, was run by legal or whatever. You can basically say, yeah, this is what we're trying to do, and here's what I think it might have, and so on. So I was really excited to read that.
Yeah, the OGL controversy just consumed my life for a month. And in fact, this past Monday night, it came up again. It just at our D&D group, and it was huge, and yeah, a lot of people are completely oblivious to it, but and a lot of people said, oh well, it's just going to go away and everyone's going to forget about it and stuff, and I would contend that it had massive repercussions on the game, on the industry. Going forward, it really will. And people might not realize when certain decisions are made and products are produced and things like that, that is, maybe that wouldn't have happened, or it would have been very different if that whole debacle hadn't happened. And so yeah, and having hearing from Dancy during the controversy was interesting, and so having his reflections afterward, looking back on it, and just it's always interesting looking at the history and sort of what was the intent of of a particular decision, like the creation of the OGL, as opposed to, what was the effect of it. And because there's always unintended consequences and stuff.
Yep.
So yeah, no, that sounds fascinating, and definitely just a valuable read. So many of these sound like I love a good story or essay where you have okay, here's some information, and you can look at it from lots of different angles and gain different things. And so, I mean, I'm in a position where I'm a publisher. And so, I'm thinking from that standpoint. I'm also a gamer, and I'm thinking from that standpoint. And, and so, and also, I play with different groups and things like that. And so, all these different perspectives, that we can have on these, and looking at, and not only from a business or just like an entertainment perspective, but there's that whole social perspective of how the influence on culture. It just astounds me what huge influence D&D has had on the broader culture. And you're not going to get that from a just from like a history of the game kind of thing. Yeah,
it's hard because a
back,
lot of those retrospectives will focus on on a few key people, for example, and they'll focus on sales numbers and that kind of stuff. I'm in the video game space a lot because I teach university where most of my students want to work in the video games industry. And it is always the case that D&D ends up being like, oh, this game right here that has nothing to do with D&D on the surface. It's like the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but it's even shorter. It's like the 3 degrees of D&D. There's always 3 jumps, and you get to someone who you either get to the game itself through some mechanic or some system that's borrowed, or you get immediately to someone's like, oh yeah, I worked on this game, and when I was a kid, I played a lot of D&D. I was a dungeon master. This is what got me started on this path. Like it is always, it's one or the other, and sometimes obviously both.
Oh yeah, and there's, I mean, the effect on the video game industry. I mean, it was actually convenient for me when I was trying, like as a kid, or more as like kind of a young adult trying to explain to people what D&D is, and as the video game industry grew, then I could say, okay, well, you got like Final Fantasy or, and stuff like that, where you can say, okay, well, you know what that is? All right, that's a role-playing game. All right, that's just the video game version of D&D. And, and so then you can say that, okay, and that was helpful. So it was interesting to see that, to sort of flip it and explain, because I think as Wizards of the Coast has realized that that the real money is in video games.
Yep.
All right. So I know that you mentioned that the final essay talks about the future, but also I'm interested in your perspectives. And you feel free to glean from that article, but also from your own thoughts on how do you see D&D influencing lives and culture in the future?
So I have a particular perspective as someone that researches a lot in the games and learning space, and that has had previous experiences as a high school teacher. I view a lot of the potential legacy of Dungeons and Dragons to be within the education space. There is a lot of great work already being done out there by educators themselves who bring Dungeons and Dragons in to help foster things like critical thinking and creativity and, understanding relationship dynamics. But I think that it is an area of interest, particularly going forward. And I think that's where a lot of the social impact may lie.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think about my ADHD, and well, let's just say it's genetic, and but also some of my kids who are, even though they are adopted, that's something that they brought with them too, so they fit right in, neurologically with the family. And when I think about that and the engagement where, you just stand in front of a room and talk, and boom, they're gone, right? But I probably was too. Boy, you engage with something interactive like that stimulates their imagination and stuff. I mean, yeah, the potential is just limitless.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's see on my end. I guess I have to start with a confession, which is, so this recent resurgence we've seen in D&D, where it's sort of really taken off, in part perhaps, or due to I'm going to call it the phenomenon of sort of the live streaming plus the live action play, the let's plays, the live play. I'm not up to date on all the lingo here, but basically watching people play D&D live is something that I can't quite wrap my head around, in the sense of both how massive it is and how popular it is. And it sort of makes me wonder if this becomes sort of a new genre of media, where, we have cop shows and we have dramas and there's a comedy and there's a sitcom and so on. And then, there'll be like the D&D thing, which that it won't be called that, but you can imagine having some name and you're just like, the latest HBO show called, Dungeons and Whatevers is out, and now it becomes a thing that is really part of the broader cultural sort of zeitgeist and phenomenon, and kind of interwoven. So I'm excited to see what that happens, and it'll take, I think, a concerted effort to put that through. It might take a couple of years for the people running the shows to move into positions at sort of bigger media companies to say, no, this is an actual thing that we need to we need to have on our programming or on our streaming site or whatever. A lot of people also talk about AI and sort of what is AI going to do in terms, and a lot of it comes from I had AI like write my book, or I had AI do some artwork, right? We've heard about this controversy in the hobby space for sure. And I think a lot of people are like, I wonder if this means that, there's two of us and we can have two AI partners, and we can have some actual sort of the real sitting around the table experience with two AI, and maybe even the Dungeon Masters in AI, and who knows. I think that's a dream for a lot of people. It'd be interesting to see if that actually happens, and what it feels like to play a game in that way. I don't think we're there yet, but this could be, 5 years time, maybe 10 years. I don't know, maybe 2 years. I'd be happy to be surprised.
Yeah, I've seen people do that. I've seen people try it, the AIs, because they are sort of kind of a lowest common denominator. Here's the average of everything. You just get a lot of goblins and bandits, and they're not real good at weaving a coherent story. But I mean, it's developing. You think how far we've come. It's hard to say. Your point about the is this a new sort of mainstream entertainment genre? So maybe you've heard the recent news about Dimension 20 selling out Madison Square Garden. The ticket prices going through the roof, and they're saying this is they're like competing with Taylor Swift, obviously, as in one item, one event, not a global tour or anything like that. Depending how this goes, and I actually had an idea how this could work, because I was watching the show Lego Masters. And all right, so okay, well, here's your task. You need to build this, and you've got X amount of time to do it and stuff. Now imagine if they took that same approach, where you have a bunch of tables of players, and there's a DM at each table, and then there's judges where they get scored on the creativity of their approach to the encounter that they're given, or or something like that. And you get to hear different people's creative approaches to different things. and so that I'm putting that out there. Anybody wants to steal that idea, they can. I would watch it religiously, and and so but yeah, you wonder how this will evolve over time. When the movie came out, or when it was announced, and all the kind of speculation of what it was going to be like, there was that question of, are they going to do like kind of a Princess Bride kind of thing, where you have that sort of narration and where it goes back and forth or something like that. And I think they made, the right decision to reach a mainstream audience at the time. But in the future, could we see something like that? That wouldn't surprise me. I've seen some actual plays that using puppets and things like that, with that method. And I thought, I like this. This is something that I could see people, as more people become aware of D&D, as it becomes more so that you don't have to explain what it is anymore.
Yeah.
Then when you start doing this, people go, "Oh, okay, I get this." And and it's a way to, I also like it from the perspective of when you're watching any kind of animation, you don't often, unless you're really into actors and keeping track of who's who and all of that, you kind of lose track of who's the person behind the voice. And to be able to connect with the actor and the character at the same time, that could be really interesting, just a way of consuming media. So
especially if the characters are getting swapped around kind of regularly. So a lot of people might get attached with, or you watch someone on a show for 9 years or 20 years or whatever it is, and you sort of condense, they become the same one person. Like, you confuse the actor with the character. But if it's every season, it's like, okay, I'm going to roll up some new characters, and they see the same same player basically, but playing with different character. It is a mind shift there. I think, and kind of, how do you relate to that? Are you relating to the character? Yes. Are you relating to the player? Also, yes. And how wild is it to think that this is a thing that we can even be talking about? I mean, like, who would have thought, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, even 50 years ago, right, that this would be a thing that would be even considered like as a possibility?
Hey, you know what? When I was in college in the early 90s, and having gone through the satanic panic, and my dad finally one day said, "All right, you're still like, this is how you're spending your weekends, going down to the student union and playing and stuff. And there's been so much controversy and everything. All right, could you just sit down and run us through a game so that we can see what it is?" I'm like, yes. and so we actually played the old Marvel Superheroes game. And
the TSR one?
Yeah, the Phase Red.
Nice.
And because it was easy, it's one of the easiest to pick up systems that I've ever used, and so it was real quick to roll up characters and stuff, and I just ran them through a little encounter and stuff, and we got all done, and my dad said, "That's it," and I said, "Yeah." He goes, "What's wrong with that?" I said, "Nothing. That's the point." And he said, "It's not really my thing, but I can see why you like it." So yeah, but even then, and there's still plenty of people that have no idea what it is, and in fact, ironically, who people in my own family that think that it's a video game.
Yeah.
and they don't really understand the concept of tabletop games. Kind of on that note, how do you respond to those who say it's just a game, what's the big deal?
Yeah, I think that, yes, it is a game for some people. People can bring themselves to the table, play their characters, and leave, and that is a valid experience. I think also some people find deeper meaning in D&D. They enjoy the connections, they enjoy creating the characters, and it is a little bit more meaningful for them. And I think that is also a valid experience of play. I don't think that they need to be mutually exclusive. I think that D&D experiences are on a spectrum. Just because someone's experience is different to yours doesn't invalidate yours.
Yeah, I think it's, it's Superman. It's just a comic book character. What's the big deal? Like, yeah, there's no big deal. But there's as much as you want to get into it and out of it. I think, in fact, if anything, I worry about the people who perhaps take it too seriously. And I say that about anybody, right? Anybody who takes this one thing really, really seriously, it becomes their entire life and consumes everything that they're doing. That I sort of wonder, I don't know, maybe there's a healthier way to live your life, right? Maybe there's some balance that needs to be taken between, it's called like the outside world and other people and other activities and so on. But I think that's one of the neat things about it, is that there is as much depth as you want to get into it. D&D and role-playing games have been used in all these other contexts, not just education, but also sort of in therapy, in community building activities, and ways to get to people to relate to each other. And I think that's fine. It's like, I guess it's like books, right? It's like, here's this book. This book is garbage. Like, yep, I agree. This book is amazing. Also, I agree. This book is kind of fun and it's for kids. So great. So in that sense, D&D is amazingly plastic, right? You could have a fun, 100% nonsense, garbage session of D&D. And when I say garbage, I mean that with love, right? Like it's like junk food, like, oh, I'm eating junk food. It's like, oh, this is great. Or you can sit down like, no, we're going to have like this really thoughtful, super in-depth role playing with deep characters and some story that's tragic and meaningful and has us question things about our own lives. I like both of these are fine. They're both D&D. And that's kind of what's wild and different and unusual about D&D as a game amongst other games.
Yeah, that's such a great point too, because so often when we talk about the work that we're doing with trying to bring more representation and things like that, and and people go, "You're ruining our game." Like, I'm not touching your game. You do things however you want. We are offering a way that people can, if they want to, that they can do things, and they don't have to. And you play the game the way you want, and guess what? In our home game, we don't always have that either. It depends on the day, and it depends on the situation and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's worth stopping to think about. And
I mean, it's always the case when I went to my first con, sort of realizing, oh, there's so many people that play the game so differently from me. And I remember sitting around a table with people complaining or arguing about whether this rule was applied or not. And as I realized, like, oh, I've never played with that rule at all, ever. It was like a whole section of, I guess if I had to pick the go-to set of rules that nobody ever uses, like the encumbrance rules, right? And here was this person, it's like, well, what about the encumbrance? I'm like, what is that a thing? And like, yes, page 52 to 95, and I was like, oh, okay. And that's cool, right? If you want to, like, we use all the rules. I'm like, nope, we have a totally different magic system. Like, the books themselves always told people, hey, this is just like a framework. It's all about imagination. You need to do whatever works best for you and your friends and your group of players, even if it makes our lives as the company selling the game harder, right? Because I always, like, this is something that they've known since the early days at TSR, which is, once you buy the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and maybe the Monsters Manual, like, you don't need to buy anything else ever again, right? That's all you need to. You're off to the races. Play for 100 years. You don't need anything else, right? So the company, like, well, no, what do we do? How do we sell more product? I think a lot of people are like, yep, we still play first edition. Cool. We still play second edition. Cool. We still play third, 2.5, all of them.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, it's the plasticity of the game. You can play it how you want. You play what rules you want. I think, we mentioned the OGL before, and I think that's one of the things that came out of it is we are seeing more and more just sort of even as Wizards is coming out with their not a new edition, but there's lots of others like Kobold Press and others who are saying, okay, well, here's our take on it, and so you can play with a little bit of their stuff and a little bit of Advanced 5e and stuff. You can kind of pick and choose what you like, see if it works together or not. And because it's a game, if you try something out and you go, yeah, that didn't really work too well together, it's like, well, we're going to do it differently next week. And you can.
Yep.
All right. So what one message would you like to give to those who are deeply passionate about the enduring legacy of Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, I guess just building on that conversation that you were both having, I think my one message would probably be just make the game your own, continue making it your own, enhance the things that bring you joy and remove the things that you don't like. But yeah, I think for D&D to have lasted for this long is because people made the game their own and they made it and play it the way that they enjoy. So yeah, just continue doing that.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to invite people to be open-minded to new ways to appreciate the game they love. Here's a different take. This book gives you a different take on how to appreciate this game, and hopefully that'll be sort of fresh and new and exciting for the readers. And hopefully we'll see the game in a different light, but in a light that is still coming from a place of deep appreciation and respect and love for the game and all the rest of that. So that's what I would hope readers would take away from it, or potential readers. Buy the book. We have to do all the shilling we can, right?
Mm-hmm. What projects are you working on next that you can talk about?
I think Jose has a pretty exciting project.
Oh, God, well. So I have another, two of them. I have another book that's 100% academic. It's called, it's a role-playing game studies. It's a book about role-playing game studies, which is a sub-discipline within games research. And it's a book that was really about kind of saying, hey, role-playing games are their own thing, and they need to be studied. And in the book, we go through how are role-playing games looked at, or why are they interesting for psychologists? Why are they interesting for economists? Why are they interesting for English professors and communication professors, and so on and so forth? So we have a second edition of that book coming out later this year, which I'm super excited for. Put together with like a huge army of collaborators and authors and so on. The other thing I'm working on, and this is really early stages, is so in the mid 80s in the UK, there was a series of fantasy books that took off like hotcakes. It was real wildfire. It's called the Fighting Fantasy books. They did make their way to the US. They weren't as popular, weren't as big. In a nutshell, these are sort of choose your own adventure books, but for slightly older kids, strong fantasy, dark, gritty fantasy, swords and sorcery, that kind of stuff. Also science fiction and so on. But also with gameplay mechanics. So you were rolling dice, and you were, had a character sheet, and you were collecting inventory, and had to solve puzzles and so on. In the UK, these books were both. So the series was created by Steve Jackson, UK Steve Jackson, and Ian Livingston, who were the founders of Games Workshop when it was, back in the original days when they were basically selling, D&D in the UK. So it's a book about these game books and how they work and what kind of the system that they have is, and how the different authors over the years have explored kind of new design angles within the narrow constraints of a little paperback book, which needs to have 400 chapters and it has like go to page 52 and go to page 93. What kinds of cool, interesting innovations in game design and in sort of the fantasy interactive storytelling do we see in these books for that? So that's what I'm working on next. Definitely a academic pet project.
Sure, but at the same time, it's fascinating because I was a huge fan of the Choose Your Own Adventure books. The D&D had the Endless Quest series.
Yep.
And I like those. I also have one. I don't remember the name of the series, but it's the book is sitting on top of my refrigerator right now. But you actually used a D6, and it was an X-Men book. And so it had that kind of choose your own adventure thing, but sometimes it was like roll, and then and you'd kind of jump between characters as you flip the pages, and but you'd have to roll to and then you'd turn the page to whatever it was depending on the result of your roll. So it came with a bookmark that had the different people's stats.
Cool.
So
Scholastic had a bunch of those books. I think Scholastic, or was it Dell, published the Fighting Fantasy ones in the US. In the US, I think the Lone Wolf series was perhaps a bit more popular. Joe Deaver, I think, wrote a bunch of those. And again, these were big in the 80s, right? And they've had there's been, I mean, they still exist, and there are people still putting out new ones with more interesting things and general, like the general idea of the game book essentially still exists. And it's interesting to see how actually game books have kind of crossed over with solo role playing, which is also like a growing trend in tabletop. And so it's interesting, like, oh, okay, people have taken the idea of the game book and let's get rid of some of the game mechanics and turn it into something new and fresh. So hopefully this book will tie into also those bigger picture trends in like solo journaling, tabletop role playing games that are really exciting to look at.
Cool. That sounds fascinating. So we will have all your. I'm sorry, Preet, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
Oh, sure. I am just doing a little bit of research kind of in the games and education tabletop space. So a few of the projects I'm working on are looking at designing specific tabletop games for things like educating children about difference and diversity, about game monetization, a broad array of different topics. So yeah, just looking more at the design aspect.
Cool.
Yeah, I think Pree's being a little bit too humble. So Pree's about to get her PhD, and so as soon as that happens, we get to officially call her the world's leading expert in D&D and education. And so I think that's
Fingers crossed.
So if you have any interest in education, if you're interested in D&D and how these kind of cross over and how to make things work, Pree would be the person to reach out to and talk to because she's the expert.
Yeah, would love to have a chat with anyone at any time. So yeah, do reach out. Thanks, Jose.
Well, my one of my daughters is a hardcore D&D player and and teaches second grade, and is always looking for ways to kind of bring those two things together. So, yeah, just need more of that. I need more of that for my kids who are in school to like, hey, teachers, this will help.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll have all your contact information in our show notes, but where's the one best place that you'd like people to learn more about you or to contact you?
Yeah, you can probably learn more about my work on my Google Scholar page, but yeah, just reach out via email or any of my socials.
Yeah, I'm, I guess, reasonably active on Twitter, though we're not supposed to call it Twitter anymore. Also, games.utah.edu is the sort of homepage for the department where I work, and you can get from there to get to my official faculty page and learn more about what's happening at the university. So if you're interested in studying games and so on, then definitely reach out. I think my email will also be in the show notes, so that's also a good way to get in touch with me.
Awesome. Yeah, I refer to it as the dumpster fire, formerly known as Twitter.
Oh, there we go. I'm hanging on. It's like, it's okay if you block people a lot, it works out. There's still plenty of good souls on Twitter, as long as you ignore the flames around. Yep.
Yeah, I had to leave. I mean, much respect for anyone who's managed to stay on there and keep their mental health. I had to, for my own mental health, leave. It was just a little bit too much hostility. So
yeah. Oh no, I believe that, and I'm very much aware of I guess the cesspool aspects of it for sure. Which is why my best friend is the block button. I block so easily and so liberally that you gotta do your own self-care too. Block, that's mine.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Everyone, check out those links in the show notes. Awesome.
Well, thanks for the invite. This has been a real pleasure, and I look forward to hearing from your viewers, listeners, and I guess your audience. How about that? I was gonna say consumers, but that sounded too. Sounded a bit icky.
Thanks, everyone.
Bree and Jose, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was so much fun, and we're hoping to have them back in the future to talk about some of their other individual work. And so really looking forward to that. And if you haven't already, subscribe so that you don't miss out on those. At the beginning of the show, I talked about how you can support our work. All right, I want to thank Cece and Jeannie Marie Hoffman, our newest patrons. Thank you so much for your support. It really makes a difference. And thanks to our patrons, I also mentioned the community copies at the beginning of the show. All All right, we add them to our store every month for those who can't afford our products. So if that's you, sign up for our weekly emails to get notified when they come available. All right, this month alone, we added $525 worth of free copies. So there's plenty there. If you'd like one or more of those titles, go ahead and get them. And thanks again to our patrons for your generous support to make that happen. Now, if you see the show being helpful, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of this, hear more of this, please subscribe so you don't miss out on any of it. If you know people that need to hear this, pass it on to them. And if you, like me, think everyone needs to hear this, then pass it on to your social media friends. And don't forget those podcast ratings. They really make a difference. So thank you so much for joining us to make lives better with tabletop games.